Okay, fundamentally, there's a lot of things that are the fundamental parts about how things move. It trends, it trends, it trends. Okay, it trends. Okay, those are the ways that things trend. Okay, and then it'll be in a box. The Darvas box moves around in a box. Okay, those are the two ways that something moves. Right. What is consistent about that is that there is something called a support and resistance throughout there. So fundamentally speaking, okay, fundamental sleeping, there are the fundamentals of trading is essentially uh, the fundamentals of trading, uh, the fundamentals of price action is okay. The fundamental of price action is that it'll either move in a trend or it's going to be range bound. And then within within the trend, it can also be range bound, but within the range bound, it can also be trending within the range bound. Okay? So that's a known factor, okay? That's a known condition. So there are shapes like a wedge. There are shapes like double bottom. There are shapes like double top. There are shapes like triple bottom. There are shapes like a V. Okay? There are shapes like just a flat line that just goes sideways for a while, right? Uh okay, that's how it moves. Okay, that's the fundamental shape of so the known thing is that okay, it has a trend and it's range bound. That's the concept of price action. Concepts of price action is trending, range bound, trending and range bound. Okay, if the range bound is very narrow, it's just gonna be a flat line, right? So those are the two concepts that are known. Okay, the other part is the other part is the other part is okay, so the other part of that is the construct of the trend and the range bound is made up of something called a uh, a pullback or a reversal. Okay, and everything else is a connecting block, connecting line between these factors. So let me just recap, which is essentially is this. Okay, uh, the fundamentals of a price action is the fundamentals of price action is uh, the fundamentals of price action is a trend and range bound. But within the trend and the range bound, there's something called a pullback and a reversal. Okay, pullback pullback and the reversal. Okay, basically a pullback before it continues, and there's also a reversal. There's a reversal, right? Those are the things that are the fundamentals of price action, right? Trend, range bound. Within it are pullbacks and reversals, and connecting those things are price moving from those structures to create all the other structures. Okay, so a wedge essentially is a price moving from a pullback to the support. Okay, essentially it's the line starts from the pullback all the way to the support area, and at that point where its support is, it can either bounce up or it can bounce down. Okay, it can go through. Okay, so that would be considered a breakout, right? So fundamentals of price action is, again repeating it, is essentially the essentially is a pullback or a reversal. It's made up of those things. So if I look at double bottom, right? Double bottom. Okay. So double bottom is essentially is a reversal. It's a reversal. It's essentially a reversal. That's a reversal. Okay, a wedge is essentially an extension of the pullback. Okay, comes back, wedge. That's essentially a pullback and then coming back. Okay, all right. It could either create a reversal or it'll continue. Right. So all these things, even those things that are break and retest, right? So it breaks and retests. It's a connection between point A to the point where there's resistance. It breaks, pulls back. It's a pullback and breaks through, and then continues. So essentially, a breakout is essentially a breakout is essentially a construct of price action moving connected to a pullback and then extending onto the pullback is breaking out into breaking out above the resistance into an area of new support and resistance, right? Newly created support and resistance, right? So then all I have to do, so those are, I mean, these are just these are building blocks of these are Lego pieces of price action, right? These are the Lego. These are essentially the building blocks of price action. Okay, the building blocks of price action is trend, range bound, right? Trend and range bound, and within them there is a pullback and a reversal. Those four things build up into all actions. It describes all manner of price movements. Okay, the building blocks of price action. Okay, the building blocks of price action are those four things that are incorporated into it to describe each moment of how the price moves. Right? That's how it moves. Okay, so then now the action is okay. So I can describe it. Now I can see why Al Brooks is describing it. So in his teaching material, he talks about the price action. He's a price action trader, and he's describing the price movements of price. Okay, he's describing the price action, the construct of price action by describing what everything is. There's a lot of things that are being described. Okay, there's a lot of things that are described in his tutorial. Okay, and so he's essentially describing the behavior of the market. He's describing the behavior of the market. So if I know the behavior of the market, then I know where the entry is and I know where the exit is. Okay, that's the critical part. That's the critical point. So now that I've described what it is, so what it is this. Okay, there's a trend and there's a range bound, and then based on those, there's a support and resistance associated with that, and associated with inside of those concepts are something called a pullback and a reversal. Okay, so those are the six principles. Those are the six principles of price action. Okay? Those are the six principles of price action. Okay? Let me name it again. Okay? The first is a trend. Okay? And the other is range bound. And then outlining these two concepts is something called a support and resistance. And then within also fully integrated into that price action is something called pullback and a reversal. Pullback and reversals happen all the time. When you have support and resistance, there could be a pullback, okay? Within a pullback, and then go back up. And then it turns into a reversal. Or it'll move back, pull back, move down, and then go to the support area and reverses. So these are the six principal concepts. These are the six principal concepts of price action. Okay, six principles of price action. Okay, right now I'm going to figure out how. Now I'm going to incorporate. Now on the next video, I'm going to incorporate my setups into take advantage of it so that I can make money from it. Okay, so that's the next video. Okay.